development of trade unions. Right, if you get this in the exam, you need to be absolutely clear that there's two strands to this really. There's the trade unions for the skilled workers and there's the trade unions for the unskilled workers, okay? So as I go through this podcast, try and press save on that so you know exactly what you're trying to say in terms of what happened with the development of trade unions. So during the Industrial Revolution, workers had no control at all over wages, hours or conditions. So their employer could do absolutely anything to them. And this obviously was a really, really significant thing. So what they did is they wanted to form trade unions because the working class wanted some sort of voice. They were absolutely sick of being told, well, you're working these hours, this is how much you're going to get paid, you're going to be doctor paid for being late, even when they weren't late. So this is where trade unions developed from. So first of all, there was the new model unions, and what they were for skilled workers. So for example, like engineers and carpenters would come under that heading. They tried to work within a structure if they possibly could. And trade unions gained legal status and members could actually picket. So trade unions weren't banned or anything. For these skilled workers, they could actually go out on strike and they could picket, you know, and like obviously said they weren't going back in till this or that had changed. But don't get me wrong, the employers weren't keen on these trade unions. And when I give you some examples about trade unions, you'll see what they're doing in terms of trying to stop them. Now, the other sort is new unionism. And this is for unskilled workers. So think match girls and the dockers, okay? So match girls and dockers strike for this one. And the trade unions, these trade unions in the end became the Labour Party that we know today. Now that should make sense because Labour as in work, because that's what Labour means. Okay, so this is where it all comes from. It's like a workers' party movement. So you need some examples then of trade unions. Well, the Tolpuddle Martyrs is a really, really good one to use. So what happened was, the Tolpuddle Martyrs were in from Devon, okay, in a place called Tolpuddle, and they were farm labourers. And they were absolutely sick of the person who was in charge of them constantly changing the wages and the hours and things like that, you know, because they kept getting changed and they kept getting less money and things. So what they did is they met under a sycamore tree, but they took an oath to keep the union and the meeting secret. Now the problem is, trade unions were not illegal, but you weren't meant to be taking any secret oaths, so this is where the problem came. So what happened was the landowners and government were scared of this, really, really scared of this. So they arrested and transported to Australia these 6 men who'd been involved in the Tolpuddle Martyrs scandal. So what happened was they got sentenced to 7 years transportation to Australia. Now this was a total overreaction, but the message was really, really clear. They did not want the working classes to have any unions. They weren't going to tolerate it. Now obviously there was huge public support for them because people thought this was utterly ridiculous. They went out for work one day, had this meeting under a sycamore tree, and then suddenly they'd been transported to Australia. So what happened was there was a huge public outcry and they received a pardon in the end, but obviously it took, you know, a couple of years to get that to happen. And there was a huge meeting in a field just near where King's Cross Station is now, about a mile north from that. And they had not actually committed a crime. This is what was really bad about it. Trade unions were legal, so they hadn't really done anything wrong, but by their sentences being overturned in the end, it shows that the trade unions did have a voice and they had actually won. Now obviously they're allowed to come back to England, but quite a lot of them emigrated to places like Canada because they just thought it was absolutely horrific the way they'd been treated, in terms of, like, you know, they'd done nothing wrong yet they got transported to Australia. So that's the Tolpuddle Martyrs, which is a good case study and example. Right, let's look at another example then of trade unions. So the match girls. So this is new unionism. This is for the unskilled workers. So it was absolutely terrible working conditions for these match girls. And the case study you need to talk about really is what happened at the Brighton May factory in London. So these poor match girls would have to work all the hours God sends, and girls would get 20 pence a week, and the grown women would get 40 pence a week. So it was very, very poor wages. And a lot of them would contract something called phossy jaw, which is really bone cancer. So what they used to do is they used to cut away the face and the jaw, and they used to make them have that operation done so they could continue to work in the factory. And as well, usually if you got something like that, it was very, very difficult like to eat, because obviously you had part of your face missing and things. And what happened is that obviously in the long run, these girls ended up dying. And the reason why it was so bad in this factory was when they were taking the phosphorus to put on the matches, and it was the white phosphorus which was really really poisonous, that they didn't really understand that at the time. The girls had to eat the lunch in the factory, so what happened is some of the phosphorus got onto the sandwiches and things, and then obviously got into the holes in the teeth, and then it gave them phossy jaw. So what happened is they decided things got so bad they were going to go out on strike, because they were known almost as the white slaves of London, because in terms of, you know, how they were being treated, it was no better than slave labour. So what happened is because they were sick of getting fined for being late when they weren't actually late, and they were sick of, you know, getting ill with phossy jaw, a journalist called Annie Besant helped to publicise the strike that they did. And that was really important, because people read this and started to feel sympathy for them. There was also marches in London and all this type of thing. And the strike action ended up working. So this took place in 1888. And the employers removed the system of deductions, okay, so they stopped fining them. They were also given a pay rise, which they'd wanted. And it was the first successful strike by any unskilled workers. So that was amazing, really, because that just would never, ever have been able to happen before. So now the working class people start to have a voice. Now, the following year, there was the Dockers' strike in 1889. So a year later, because of how well the match girls had done in their strike, the dockers thought, we're going to strike as well. So all a docker is some men who go down to the docks, they help to load and unload ships and things, maybe do some alterations or repairs to ships if they need doing. So what happened the dockers wanted a definite 4-hour day, because sometimes they'd turn up and there wouldn't actually be any work for them to do, so then they were turned away. So they had no guaranteed wages coming in. They also wanted a rise from 5p an hour to 6p an hour, and for any overtime they wanted 8p an hour. So what happened was Ben Tillett was the person who led it, and he led quite a militant strike, so he was quite sort of violent in his approach to this. He didn't want people going in and doing work while others went on strike. So they marched through the gates, they marched through the streets of London, and they picketed the gates of the London docks to the extent at one point the London docks was like completely closed at one point, because they were picketing the gates to stop any blacklegs or scabs coming through who were trying to do work when the others, you know, were on strike. And also, in terms of it, it kept going and going, the strike, because they got donations from public sympathy, because they thought, yeah, they'll put those poor dockers, that is unfair. And actually, Australia, because of communication things, then Australian people were actually donating money as well. So the strike lasted for quite a while. Now, what happened in terms of it, they stopped the blacklegs coming in, and the strike action did work, just like it had for the match girls. And what happened they then got a 4-hour working day, like a definite 4-hour day, so you might do 9 till 1 or 1 till 5 or something like that. And also they got the guaranteed pay rise to 6p an hour, and also the agreed amount for overtime. So what the match girls and the dockers show is even unskilled workers that you think, oh, anyone could do those jobs, unskilled workers had actually managed to turn things around. They now started to have some sort of voice.